They still whisper his name in the South, like a warning. Malachi Holt, a man born in chains, who tried to come home after the war, just to save his little sister. But what he found was darker than any battlefield. Plantations still running in secret, still stealing black lives as if freedom never happened. And when they beat him and left him to die, something broke open inside him. Something old, something deadly. People say he picked up his father's gun, and overnight became the sharpest shot anyone had ever seen. But this isn't some heroic tale. Malachi didn't want to be a killer. He was forced into becoming a storm. With every plantation he tore apart, folks cheered, but others whispered that no man could fight evil that long without becoming a little like it. And now the question that haunts every tale told about him. When a broken world makes a monster to fight its monsters, what's left of the man when the smoke finally clears? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The fog hung heavy over the Louisiana dirt road, thick enough to swallow sound. Malachi Holt's boots made soft thuds against packed earth as he walked. Each step carried him closer to a place he never wanted to see again. His worn satchel bumped against his hip. Inside lay everything he owned now: a spare shirt, dried meat wrapped in cloth, and a folded paper with official stamps. The freedom certificate felt heavier than it should. He'd memorized every word on that document, read it so many times the creases threatened to tear. But none of those words told him where Sarah was. The plantation gates appeared through the mist, like a ghost materializing. Malachi stopped. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd been preparing for this moment since the day Union soldiers marched through and declared them free. 2 years of working whatever jobs he could find. 2 years of saving every coin. 2 years of asking everyone he met if they'd seen a girl named Sarah Holt. Most people just shook their heads. Some looked away, uncomfortable. A few whispered that old plantation families didn't always honor emancipation right away. Malachi pulled the certificate from his satchel, unfolded it carefully. The paper caught what little morning light filtered through the fog. "I am a free man," he whispered, testing the words again. "I have legal right to retrieve my sister." The rehearsal felt hollow, but he'd practiced this speech 100 times. Stay calm. Show the certificate. Explain that Sarah is his blood kin. Ask, politely, where she went after the war ended. He tucked the paper into his coat pocket and started walking again. The plantation looked wrong. Malachi expected ruins, expected burned fields and collapsed buildings like he'd seen at other places. The war had torn through here. Sherman's march had touched parts of Louisiana. Everyone said the old world was dying, but Holt Plantation looked alive. Smoke rose from the quarters. People moved between buildings, carrying tools and baskets. The fields stretched out in neat rows, recently tilled. Malachi could hear voices calling to each other in the distance. His stomach turned cold. A white man sat on a horse near the main house. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and had a rifle across his saddle. When he saw Malachi, he straightened. "You lost, boy?" Malachi kept his hands visible, non-threatening. "My name is Malachi Holt. I was born here. I'm looking for my sister, Sarah Holt." The overseer, Malachi recognized him now, Jonas Creighton, nudged his horse forward. "Holt's dead. Been dead for years. My father." "Yes, sir." Malachi reached slowly for his pocket. "But I have papers. Freedom certificate. I'm here to retrieve my sister. She's 16 now. We were separated during... Ain't no Sarah here. I just need to check the quarters. If she's not here, someone might remember where... I said she ain't." Creighton's hand moved to his rifle. "And you're trespassing on private property." Malachi pulled out the certificate. His hand didn't shake, though his pulse roared in his ears. "The law says I can." Law says you can work or you can starve. Creighton whistled sharply. Two more men emerged from the barn. They carried wooden clubs. This boy's making trouble. I'm not making trouble. I just want my sister. But Malachi was already moving backward. Survival instinct kicked in, the same instinct that had kept him breathing through 23 years of bondage. He didn't move fast enough. The first overseer grabbed his arm. Malachi jerked away, but the second one swung his club into Malachi's ribs. Air exploded from his lungs. "Stop! I have rights. The certificate." Another blow caught his shoulder. Malachi stumbled. His satchel fell into the dirt. Creighton dismounted slowly, deliberately. He picked up the freedom certificate where it had fallen from Malachi's hand, read it, then tore it in half. "Rights," Creighton said, "are for people who can enforce them." The beating was methodical, professional. They knew exactly how to hurt him without leaving marks that would kill too quickly. Malachi tried to protect his head, tried to curl into a ball. But there were three of them, and they worked with practiced efficiency. Between blows, Malachi heard Creighton talking. "We got labor contracts now, legal and everything. Workers sign on for housing and food. Most can't read what they're signing, but that ain't my problem." A boot caught Malachi's stomach. He tasted blood. "Your sister signed her contract. She belongs here until her debt's paid off." Malachi tried to speak, tried to say that was illegal, that debt peonage was just slavery with paperwork, but his mouth wouldn't work right. The overseers dragged him toward the quarters. Malachi's vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw faces watching from doorways. Black faces, free people who weren't free. Then he heard it. Running footsteps, a child's voice shouting, "I ain't staying, I ain't." A boy, couldn't be more than 12, burst from between two buildings. He ran fast, arms pumping, heading for the tree line beyond the fields. He almost made it. Two overseers on horseback cut him off. The boy tried to dodge, but one of them leaned down and snatched him by his shirt. The child screamed, kicked. His small fists pounded uselessly against the man's arm. "Please, please, I got papers. My mama got papers." They dragged him back toward the quarters. His screams echoed across the plantation. Malachi watched through swelling eyes, watched the boy's terror, watched the casual brutality of men who knew no one would stop them. Something shifted inside his chest, something deeper than pain, deeper than fear. This was still happening. The war had ended. Emancipation had been declared. Papers had been signed in distant offices by important men. And none of it mattered here. Creighton's voice cut through the fog. "Dump him past the property line. Let him crawl home." Strong hands grabbed Malachi's arms. They hauled him across the ground. His boots dragged through dirt and weeds. At dusk, they reached a ditch at the plantation's edge. The overseers dropped him without ceremony. Malachi's body hit the ground in a heap. "You come back," one of them said. "We'll kill you proper next time." Their laughter faded as they rode away. Horse hooves thumped against earth, growing distant. Malachi lay in the ditch. Pain radiated through every part of him. His ribs screamed with each shallow breath. Blood pooled in his mouth. Night insects began their song around him. Crickets and cicadas, the sounds of Louisiana evening. The darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. Malachi didn't fight it. He let it come. His last conscious thought was of the boy's screams, of Sarah, somewhere on that plantation, trapped in a contract she couldn't read, of the certificate torn in half, of freedom that existed only on paper. Then, nothing. The darkness had texture. It pressed against Malachi's face like wet cloth. He surfaced slowly. Pain came first, sharp stabs in his ribs, dull throbs everywhere else. Then awareness. He was still in the ditch, still breathing. Hands touched his shoulder. Malachi jerked. His body screamed protest at the movement. "Easy now." The voice was low. Careful. You're hurt bad enough without making it worse. A lantern swung into view. The light stabbed Malachi's eyes. He squinted, trying to make out the figure kneeling beside him. A black man. Older than Malachi by maybe a decade. He wore Union blue, or what was left of it. The coat was faded and patched, but the brass buttons caught the lantern light. "Can you talk?" the man asked. Malachi's mouth tasted like copper. He worked his jaw experimentally. "Who?" "Captain Ezra Pike, Army Scout." Ezra set the lantern down and examined Malachi's face with gentle fingers. "What's your name?" "Malachi. Malachi Holt." Ezra's hands stopped moving. He pulled back slightly, studying Malachi's features in the lamplight. "Holt? That's what I thought. You got his eyes?" "Whose eyes?" "We'll get to that." Ezra helped Malachi sit up. The world tilted dangerously. "First, let's see if anything's broken inside." The examination was thorough but quick. Ezra had clearly done this before. His fingers probed ribs, checked joints, tested reflexes. When he touched Malachi's left side, pain exploded bright and hot. "Cracked rib? Maybe two." Ezra pulled bandages from a pack Malachi hadn't noticed. "You're lucky. Could have been worse." "Doesn't feel lucky." "You're breathing." "That's lucky enough." Ezra began wrapping Malachi's torso. "What were you doing at Holt Plantation?" "Looking for my sister." Malachi winced as the bandages tightened. "Sarah. She's still there. They said she signed a labor contract." Ezra's face darkened. "Contract. That's what they call it now. You know what's happening there?" "I know what's happening at 32 plantations across Louisiana and Mississippi." Ezra tied off the bandage. "Can you stand?" With help, Malachi got to his feet. His legs trembled but held. "There's a barn about half a mile from here," Ezra said. "Abandoned since before the war. We can rest there until sunrise." The walk took forever. Every step sent fresh waves of pain through Malachi's body. But Ezra was patient, letting him move at his own pace, supporting him when he stumbled. The barn materialized from the darkness, a skeletal structure with more gaps than walls, but it had a roof. That was enough. Ezra settled Malachi onto a pile of relatively clean hay. Then he built a small fire in a metal bucket, just enough for light and warmth without drawing attention. "You said I have his eyes," Malachi said. "Whose?" Ezra reached into his pack. He pulled out something wrapped in oilcloth, unwrapped it carefully. A revolver. The metal was old but well-maintained. The grip was worn smooth from years of use. "Your father's," Ezra said. Malachi stared at the weapon. "My father was a field hand. He died when I was young." "Your father was a lot of things before he became a field hand." Ezra set the revolver on the ground between them. "He was called Holt the Hawk. Best shot I ever saw. Maybe the best shot in the whole South." "That's not possible." "Why? Because enslaved men can't be remarkable?" Ezra's voice carried no judgment, just curiosity. Malachi had no answer to that. "He participated in a revolt," Ezra continued. "Small one. Didn't go anywhere. Most revolts don't. But your father, he was different. He could shoot a coin out of the air, could hit targets in the dark, saved a lot of lives before they caught him. If he was so skilled, why did I never know? Why did he die quietly in a field?" Ezra pulled out another item. A journal, leather-bound and thick. Because that's what survival looked like for him. He hid what he could do, pretended to be ordinary, raised you to be invisible. He handed the journal to Malachi. "But before he died, he gave me these. Made me promise to find you someday. Made me promise to tell you that you inherited more than his name." Malachi opened the journal with shaking hands. The pages were filled with sketches, diagrams of shooting stances, notes on wind and distance, tactical observations written in careful script. "I don't understand." "Your father believed in preparation." Ezra fed another stick to the fire. He knew the war was coming. Knew that someday Someone would need these skills to finish what he started. I've never fired a gun in my life. Never wanted to, you mean? Malachi closed the journal. Guns are what overseers carry, what patrollers use. They're tools of terror. They're tools, Ezra said simply. Terror depends on who's holding them. He picked up the revolver and offered it to Malachi. Try it. Just once. If you hate it, I'll never ask again. Malachi looked at the weapon, his stomach twisted with revulsion. Every memory he had of guns involved pain, violence, control. But he also remembered the boy's screams, remembered Sarah trapped somewhere behind those plantation gates, remembered his freedom certificate torn in half. He took the revolver. It was heavier than he expected. The metal felt cold even through the worn grip. His finger found the trigger instinctively. There's a fence post outside, Ezra said. About 20 yards. Just point and squeeze. Don't think about it. Malachi stood. His ribs protested, but he ignored them. He walked to the barn's largest gap and raised the revolver. The fence post was barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, just a shadow against slightly lighter shadows. He aimed, squeezed. The gunshot cracked through the silence. The recoil jerked his arm up. But even as the sound echoed away, Malachi saw splinters explode from the post's center. Ezra appeared beside him. He held up the lantern, illuminating the fence post. The bullet had struck dead center. Beginner's luck, Malachi whispered. Try again. Malachi fired. Same result. Center mass. A third shot. A fourth. Each one perfect. His hands started shaking. Not from fear, from something else entirely. It's in your blood, Ezra said quietly. Your father's gift, whether you want it or not. Malachi lowered the revolver. His chest felt tight, and not from his injured ribs. I've been tracking these illegal plantations, Ezra continued, documenting them, trying to build evidence to bring to federal authorities. But evidence doesn't matter when the authorities don't care. Or when the people running these places have enough money to make problems disappear. Why are you telling me this? Because I need help. Because 32 plantations are still operating with forced labor. Because your sister is in one of them. Ezra's eyes met his. And because you're Holt's son? That means something. It means I can shoot straight. Nothing more. It means you have a choice your father never got to make. Malachi turned away. The revolver hung heavy in his hand. I can't, he said. I won't become what they are. I'm not asking you to become anything. I'm asking you to free people, including your sister. The boy's screams echoed in Malachi's memory. That desperate, terrified voice. I ain't staying. Malachi looked down at the revolver, at his father's weapon. A tool that had been used to fight back once. A tool that had been hidden away when fighting became impossible. Let me think, he said. Ezra nodded. Take until sunrise. That's when I move on to the next plantation. He left Malachi alone. The sky was beginning to lighten. Dawn approached slowly, turning the darkness from black to deep blue to pale gray. Malachi walked to the fence post, examined the bullet holes clustered in its center. 5 perfect shots from a man who'd never held a gun before tonight. He raised the revolver one more time, pointed it at the post. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the terrible realization of what he was capable of. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck center perfectly. The horses moved quietly through the pre-dawn darkness. Ezra led, following roads he'd mapped weeks earlier. Malachi rode behind, his father's revolver heavy against his hip. They'd left the barn an hour before sunrise. Ezra had produced the horses from somewhere. Malachi hadn't asked where. Some questions didn't need answers. Briar Run is smaller than Holt Plantation, Ezra said without turning around. Maybe 20 people held there. The owner died during the war. His son runs it now. Calls himself a businessman. What's his real business? Selling labor contracts to railroad companies. Logging operations. Anyone who needs workers and doesn't ask questions. Ezra guided his horse around a fallen branch. The workers never see freedom. The contracts get extended. Fees get added. It's slavery with paperwork. Malachi's jaw tightened. His ribs still ached from yesterday's beating, but the pain felt distant now. Secondary. The plan is simple, Ezra continued. I approach as a federal scout investigating reports. You're my prisoner, a runaway I caught trying to flee north. They'll want to hold you while they verify my credentials. That gets you inside. And then? Then you do what needs doing. They rode in silence after that. The road curved through dense woods, following a creek that reflected the lightening sky. Birds began their morning songs. Briar Run appeared suddenly, a collection of buildings clustered around a main house that had seen better days. White paint peeled from the walls. The fence sagged in places, but the holding sheds behind the house looked sturdy, recently reinforced. Put these on. Ezra handed Malachi a set of iron shackles. Leave them loose enough to slip off. Malachi fitted the shackles around his wrists. The metal felt obscene against his skin. He'd worn chains before. Every enslaved person had. But wearing them voluntarily, even as a disguise, made his stomach turn. They approached the gate. A guard stood there, rifle across his chest. Young, maybe 20. Hold there, the guard called. Ezra raised a hand. Federal Scout, Captain Ezra Pike. Got a prisoner for holding. The guard stepped closer, examining them. His eyes lingered on Malachi. Where'd you catch him? 10 miles north. He had stolen travel papers, claimed he was free. They all claim that, the guard spat. Bring him to the overseer's office. Mr. Dalton will want to see him. They rode through the gate. Malachi kept his head down, playing the part. But his eyes tracked everything. Guard positions, building layouts, escape routes. The overseer's office occupied a small building beside the main house. The guard knocked, then opened the door without waiting for response. Inside, a man sat behind a desk covered in papers. Late 40s. Thin. He looked up with the expression of someone constantly annoyed by interruptions. Mr. Dalton, the guard said. Federal Scout brought a prisoner. Dalton studied Ezra, then Malachi. What's the charge? Fraudulent freedom papers. Theft. Resistance to federal authority. Ezra's voice carried perfect bureaucratic boredom. I need to hold him while I verify his actual status with the Freedmen's Bureau. We're not a jail. You're a registered labor facility. Federal authority supersedes local operations. Ezra pulled out a document that looked official. Malachi had no idea if it was real. I'll need him secured in your holding area. 48 hours maximum. Dalton sighed. He reached for a ledger, made a note. Fine. Put him with the others. But if he causes trouble, he's your problem. Understood. The guard led them toward the holding sheds. 3 buildings, each with barred windows. The guard unlocked the nearest one, shoved Malachi inside, then locked it behind him. Darkness, the smell of unwashed bodies, and fear. Malachi waited until footsteps faded. Then he slipped the shackles off his wrists. Who are you? A voice whispered from the shadows. Malachi's eyes adjusted. 6 people huddled in the shed. 4 men, 2 women. All black. All wearing the exhausted expressions of people who'd stopped hoping. Someone who's getting you out, Malachi said quietly. That's what the last one said. This from an older woman in the corner. They caught him trying to run. Haven't seen him since. Malachi moved to the window, examined the bars. Solid iron, set deep in the frame. But the frame itself was wood. Old wood. How many guards? He asked. 4 during the day, one of the men answered. 2 at night. They rotate. Where's the overseer sleep? Main house, 2nd floor. Malachi pulled his father's revolver from beneath his shirt. The captives stared. When I say run, Malachi told them, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Head east toward the creek. Follow it north until you find a burned oak tree split by lightning. Wait there. You're just one man, the older woman said. I know. He waited until full dark. Through the window he watched the guard patterns. 2 men walked the perimeter in opposite directions, meeting every 15 minutes. Predictable. When they separated, Malachi wrapped his shirt around the revolver's barrel to muffle the sound. Aimed through the window bars at the lock mechanism on the door. The shot cracked. Muffled, but not silent. The lock shattered. Malachi kicked the door open. The nearest guard turned, reaching for his rifle. Malachi fired twice. Center mass. The guard dropped without a sound. The second guard came running. Malachi stepped into the shadow of the building, let him pass, then shot him in the back. Clean. Efficient. No hesitation. The captives emerged from the shed, staring at the bodies. Move, Malachi ordered. But he didn't follow them yet. He ran toward the overseer's office instead. The door was locked. He shot the lock, kicked it open. Inside, he found what he was looking for. Filing cabinets, ledgers, documents. He started searching, pulling drawers open, scattering papers, footsteps outside. Shouts. The compound was waking up. Malachi's hand closed on a leather-bound ledger hidden beneath false bottom in the bottom drawer. He pulled it out, flipped it open. Names, dates, locations. His heart stopped. 32 plantations, each one listed with coordinates, supply routes, and personnel notes. And beside certain names, including one that made his blood run cold, was a symbol. A circle with a slash through it. High-value captives. Sarah's name was there, but not at Briar Run, at a place called Mercy Grove, 2 counties east, and beside her name, reserved for Birmingham transfer. She wasn't just being held, she was being moved, traded. Malachi tucked the ledger inside his shirt. An oil lamp sat on the desk, still burning. He knocked it over as he left. Outside, chaos had erupted. Guards ran toward the holding sheds. The freed captives scattered into the woods. Someone rang a bell. Malachi shot the 2 remaining guards with surgical precision. Neither had time to raise their weapons. He found Ezra near the gate, mounted and ready. The freed captives were already disappearing into the tree line. Time to go, Ezra said. Malachi swung onto his horse. Behind them, flames began to spread from the overseer's office, catching on the dry wood of the adjacent buildings. The fire grew quickly, feeding on years of neglect. They rode hard toward the creek. Behind them, Briar Run burned orange against the dark sky. At the burned oak tree, the freed captives waited. They stared at Malachi with something between fear and reverence. Follow the creek north, Ezra told them. There's a settlement called Haven's Rest about 15 miles. Tell them Captain Pike sent you. They'll help. The older woman approached Malachi. What's your name? Malachi. They'll ask who freed us. Malachi started to answer, but Ezra spoke first. Tell them the hawk has returned. The woman studied Malachi's face. Then she nodded and led the others into the darkness. Malachi and Ezra rode east, away from the smoke. Dawn was breaking now, painting the sky gray and pink. You found something, Ezra said. It wasn't a question. Malachi pulled out the ledger. 32 plantations, all connected. My sister's at one called Mercy Grove. They're moving her. Moving her where? Birmingham. Malachi's hands tightened on the reins. What's in Birmingham? Ezra's face went dark. Nothing good. If they're transferring high-value captives there, it means they're selling them. Rich families looking for domestic help. Factory owners needing skilled workers. People who can pay premium prices for people who can't fight back. How long until she's moved? The ledger have dates? Malachi flipped pages, found Sarah's entry. His stomach dropped. 3 days. Then that's how long we have. They crested a ridge. Behind them, smoke rose in a thick column from Briar Run. Ahead, the road stretched east toward Mercy Grove, toward Sarah. Malachi looked down at his hands. at his father's revolver, at the blood that wasn't there but that he could feel anyway. He'd killed 4 men tonight. 4 human beings. He waited for guilt, for horror, for the corruption he'd feared. Instead, he felt nothing, just cold clarity. "Word will spread," Ezra said quietly, watching the smoke. "The hawk has returned." Malachi didn't deny it. The settlement appeared just after dawn, a collection of wooden structures hidden in a grove of cypress trees, close enough to the creek that water was always nearby, but far enough from main roads to avoid attention. Someone had built it carefully, with purpose. Ezra led them through a narrow path marked by stones painted white. The freed captives from Briar Run walked close together, silent and watchful. A woman emerged from the largest building. She was perhaps 35, wearing a plain work dress with her hair tied back in a neat scarf. Her eyes swept over the group with the quick assessment of someone used to making fast decisions about who to trust. "Captain Pike," she said. Her voice was steady, controlled. "You brought company." "Briar Run survivors," Ezra replied. "They need shelter, food, time to decide where they go next." The woman's gaze moved to Malachi. She studied him for a long moment. "You're the one who took down Briar Run." It wasn't a question. "I helped," Malachi said. 4 guards dead. Overseer's office burned. 30 acres of fence destroyed." She crossed her arms. "That's more than helping." Ezra dismounted. "Nora Bennett, meet Malachi Holt." "Malachi, this is Nora. She runs the settlement. And some other things." Nora gestured for others to help the freed captives. Women and men emerged from buildings, bringing water and blankets. The older woman from the shed embraced one of them, crying. "Walk with me," Nora said to Malachi. They moved away from the main cluster of buildings toward a smaller structure near the creek. Inside, it looked like a storage shed. But when Nora closed the door and lit a lamp, Malachi saw maps covering the walls, notes pinned everywhere, a table covered in documents. "This is what I do," Nora said. "I collect information. My network includes 43 women working as domestics in white households across 3 parishes. We listen. We read documents left on desks. We memorize names and numbers, and we share what we learn." Malachi pulled out the ledger from Briar Run, set it on the table. "Then you'll want this." Nora opened it. Her eyes widened as she flipped through pages. She stopped at one section, studied it closely, then looked up at Malachi. "You know what this is?" "A list of plantations still operating illegally." "It's more than that." She pointed to the symbols. "These marks, they're a classification system. The circle with a slash means high-value captive, someone young, skilled, or who can be sold for premium prices. The triangle means labor only. The square means troublemaker." Malachi's chest tightened. "My sister has a circle." Nora found the entry. "Sarah Holt, age 14, literate, marked for Birmingham transfer." She paused. "But there's a note here. See this annotation?" Malachi looked. Someone had written Fort Jessup in small letters beside the Birmingham reference. "Fort Jessup is an abandoned military outpost," Nora explained. "It's being used as a transfer hub. They hold high-value captives there before moving them to buyers up north." She met his eyes. "If your sister's going to Fort Jessup first, we have a chance to intercept. How long do I have?" Nora checked another document on her wall, a hand-drawn map with dates marked. "My sources say there's a transfer convoy leaving in 3 days. If your sister's on it, that's when they'll move her. 3 days." Malachi felt the weight of it. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to get strong enough, smart enough, ready enough. "I need to go alone," he said. "That's stupid." The bluntness surprised him. Nora leaned against the table. "You took down Briar Run because you had Surprise and Captain Pike backing you up. Fort Jessup won't be that easy. It's defended by ex-Confederate officers who know what they're doing. If you go alone, you'll die. And your sister will disappear forever." Malachi's jaw tightened. "What are you suggesting?" "An alliance. You need information. I can provide it. You need fighters. There are men here who want to help. Some are veterans. Some are just angry enough to take the risk, she straightened. And I need what you have, which is precision, skill, the willingness to do what needs doing. Nora's expression hardened. I've been gathering intelligence for 2 years. I know where these plantations are. I know who runs them. But knowing isn't enough. Someone has to act. Malachi looked at the maps on the wall, at the careful notes, at the evidence of a network built piece by piece. If we do this, he said slowly, it can't just be about my sister. If we're taking down Fort Jessup, we free everyone there. Agreed. And we use that ledger. All 32 plantations. We dismantle the whole system. Nora extended her hand. Then we have an alliance. Malachi shook it. The next 3 days moved with brutal efficiency. Nora introduced Malachi to a group of 8 men, 6 freedmen who'd fought in the Union Army, and 2 who'd simply survived long enough to want revenge. They gathered in a clearing behind the settlement each morning. Malachi showed them what his father's journal taught him, how to aim without hesitation, how to move silently, how to use darkness and surprise as weapons. By the second day, they functioned like a unit. On that same afternoon, Malachi led 4 of them to a small plantation called Riverside Hold. Nora's spies had confirmed it held 17 captives under fraudulent contracts. They hit it at dusk, fast and clean. 2 guards down before anyone raised alarm, the overseer fled. By nightfall, all 17 were free, and Riverside Hold's records were ash. On the 3rd day, they struck again. A place called Thornfield, larger and better defended. This time, Malachi sent 2 men to create a distraction while he and the others breached from the rear. 8 guards total. 3 died. 5 surrendered. 23 captives walked free before dawn. Word spread faster than fire. The Hawk has returned. The Hawk is real. The Hawk is coming. Nora's network buzzed with reports. White households whispered about a black gunslinger dismantling the Shadow Plantation system. Some said he was a ghost. Others said he was death itself. Malachi didn't care what they called him. He cared about the map on Nora's wall, where she crossed off each liberated plantation with red ink. 2 down. 30 to go. But first, Fort Jessup, evening of the 3rd day. Malachi sat alone outside the settlement's armory, a small shed where they stored weapons and ammunition. His father's revolver lay across his lap. He'd been adjusting the sights, making minute corrections based on how the barrel pulled left in sustained fire. Footsteps approached. Nora. She didn't sit, just stood there, holding a piece of paper. My contact at the Whitmore estate just sent word, she said. Her voice was tight, urgent. There's a convoy leaving tonight. 3 wagons, armed escort, headed for Fort Jessup. Malachi looked up. Tonight? The transfer wasn't supposed to happen until tomorrow. They moved it up. Someone tipped them off about Briar Run and Riverside. They're spooked. Nora handed him the paper. But here's what matters. Your sister's on the lead wagon. Malachi stood. His hands were steady. His mind was cold and clear. How many guards? At least 12. Maybe more at the fort itself. Route? North Road through Willow Pass. It's the only route wide enough for wagons. Nora pointed to the map she'd brought. There's a bottleneck here. Trees on both sides. Road narrows. If you're going to hit them, that's where. Malachi studied the map, calculated distances, timing, variables. I need 6 men, he said. The best shots. You'll have them. And I need this done quietly. No fires this time, no chaos. We stop the convoy, extract the captives, and disappear before reinforcements arrive. Nora nodded. When do you leave? Malachi checked the position of the sun. Maybe 2 hours until full dark. Now, he said. He picked up his father's revolver, checked the chamber. 6 bullets. Enough. The half-moon hung low in the sky, casting pale light through the pine trees. Malachi rode at the front of the column, Ezra beside him. Behind them came Nora and 8 others, men who'd proven themselves capable over the past 3 days. They moved in silence. No talking, only the soft crunch of hooves on dirt and pine needles. The convoy would reach Willow Pass in less than an hour if Nora's timing was right. But Malachi had changed the plan during the ride. Hitting the convoy meant risking Sarah in crossfire. Better to go straight to the source. Fort Jessup itself. He'd explained it to the others during a brief stop. Nora had argued, said it was too dangerous, too heavily defended, but Ezra backed him up. And the men trusted Malachi's instincts now. So they rode on. The fort appeared through the trees just before dawn. Old stone walls, half collapsed in places. Wooden structures built inside the original perimeter. Lamplight glowed in 2 buildings. Smoke rose from a chimney. They dismounted a quarter-mile out, tied the horses in a dense thicket, where they wouldn't be seen. Malachi gathered everyone close, spoke in whispers. Nora's spies confirmed the fort holds captives in the eastern barracks. That's our target. We go in through the collapsed section on the south wall. Here. He pointed to a gap visible even from this distance. 2 men stay outside as lookouts. The rest come with me. We move silent. No shots unless absolutely necessary. One of the men, a veteran named Moses, raised his hand slightly. What about guards? 3 on rotation according to Nora's intelligence. 2 awake, 1 sleeping. We take them quiet. And if it goes loud? Malachi met his eyes. Then we shoot straight and move fast. They spread out, approaching the fort from different angles to avoid creating a single visible group. Malachi moved with Ezra and 2 others, Moses and a younger man named Thomas. Nora led the second group. The collapsed wall section was exactly where her map indicated. Old stones tumbled into a pile, leaving a gap wide enough to crawl through. Malachi went first, sliding between broken rocks, feeling sharp edges scrape his shoulders. Inside, the fort was quiet. Dawn light just starting to touch the tops of the walls. Malachi spotted the first guard near the well. A white man, rifle slung across his back, yawning. Malachi signaled Ezra. They moved like shadows, closing the distance. The guard never heard them. Ezra's arm locked around the man's throat. 15 seconds. The guard slumped unconscious. They dragged him behind a water trough. The second guard was harder. He stood near the main building, alert, scanning the yard. Malachi couldn't approach without being seen. He looked at Thomas, made a gesture. Distraction. Thomas nodded, picked up a stone, threw it hard toward the opposite wall. The guard's head snapped toward the sound. He walked that direction, rifle ready. Malachi moved, closed the distance while the guard's back was turned, grabbed him from behind, one hand over the mouth, the other wrenching the rifle away. The guard struggled. Malachi tightened his grip until the man went limp. 2 down. Nora's group emerged from the gap in the wall. She pointed toward the eastern barracks, a long wooden structure with barred windows. They crossed the yard in a tight formation, reached the barracks door. It was locked. Moses produced a pry bar from his pack, worked it into the gap between door and frame. The wood splintered with a soft crack. The lock gave. Inside, the air smelled like sweat and fear. Rows of wooden bunks lined both walls. People stirred in the dim light. Men, women, a few children. Their eyes went wide when they saw armed black men entering. Malachi raised a hand. We're here to get you out. Stay quiet. Move when we say. He walked down the center aisle, searching faces. His heart pounded. She had to be here. The ledger said she'd be here. Near the back, on a lower bunk, he saw her. Sarah. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hair was cut short. Her dress torn and dirty. But her eyes. Those were the same eyes that used to watch him practice reading by candlelight back when they were children. She recognized him instantly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Malachi knelt beside the bunk. "It's me," he whispered. "It's Malachi." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for him. He pulled her into his arms. She was shaking, silent sobs racking her thin frame. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you." A shout erupted outside. The third guard, the one who'd been sleeping. He stood in the doorway of another building, pointing at the barracks. "Intruders! We got intruders!" Gunfire cracked through the morning air. Malachi pulled Sarah down. "Stay low!" Moses and Thomas returned fire through the barracks windows. Glass shattered. Wood splintered. Ezra shouted, "We need to move! Now!" Malachi helped Sarah to her feet. "Can you run?" She nodded. Nora was already directing the other captives toward the door. "Single file. Stay behind us." They poured out of the barracks into chaos. Guards emerged from buildings, rifles raised. Malachi counted 5. No, 6. He drew his father's revolver. The first guard went down with a bullet through the shoulder. The second took one to the leg. Malachi moved with cold precision, each shot calculated to disable, not kill. He needed them alive to answer questions later. But one guard, a tall man with a scarred face, aimed directly at Sarah. Malachi didn't hesitate. Center mass. The man dropped. "Go!" Ezra shouted. "Get them to the wall!" Nora led the captives in a sprint toward the collapsed section. Moses and Thomas laid down covering fire. Malachi stayed at the rear, protecting Sarah, making sure no one got left behind. A bullet whizzed past his head. He turned, fired twice. Another guard fell. They reached the wall, started pushing captives through the gap. 23 people total. Sarah had whispered the count while they ran. 23 souls who'd been marked for sale. Malachi went through last, pulling Sarah after him. Behind them, the fort erupted in shouts and confusion. But they were already moving into the forest, spreading out, following the escape routes Nora had planned. The horses waited where they'd left them. They mounted quickly, pulling captives up behind riders. Sarah sat behind Malachi, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. They rode hard through the morning, didn't stop until the sun was high and the fort was miles behind them. Nightfall found them back at the settlement. The freed captives were given food, water, shelter. Women from Nora's network embraced them, promising safety. Sarah hadn't let go of Malachi's hand since they'd dismounted. She followed him to the main campfire, where settlers gathered each evening. He sat on a log near the flames. She sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "I thought the same about you. They kept moving us. Every few weeks, a new place. They said we were going north, said there were buyers waiting." Her voice cracked. "I tried to remember everything Mama taught us. Stay strong, stay smart, survive." Malachi put his arm around her. "You did. You survived. Because you came for me." The fire crackled. Sparks drifted into the dark sky. Sarah's breathing slowed. Her weight grew heavier against him. Within minutes, she was asleep, exhausted, finally safe. Malachi sat very still, watching the flames flicker across his sister's face. For the first time since leaving the plantation 3 days ago, he felt something other than cold determination, hope, fragile, uncertain, but real. The fire burned warm against the night. The next morning arrived with unexpected quiet. Malachi woke to the smell of cornmeal cooking. He sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered. Sarah, the rescue, safety. His sister knelt beside a small fire a few feet away, turning cornbread in a blackened skillet. She'd borrowed the pan from one of the settlement women. Her movements were careful, practiced, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. She noticed him watching, offered a small smile. "Thought you might be hungry." He was. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a full meal. She brought him a piece of the cornbread on a wooden plate. Still warm, simple, but it tasted better than anything he'd had in weeks. "Thank you," he said. Sarah sat beside him. They ate in comfortable silence. Around them, the settlement stirred to life. Children playing, women hanging laundry, men repairing a wagon wheel. Normal things, peaceful things. For a few hours, Malachi let himself believe they might actually be safe. Afternoon came too fast. Malachi was helping Moses repair a fence when he heard hoofbeats. A single rider, pushing his horse hard. One of Nora's scouts, a man named Daniel who'd been posted near the northern safe house. The horse was lathered, breathing hard. Daniel practically fell from the saddle. "The safe house," he gasped. "It's gone. Burned." Malachi dropped the hammer he'd been holding. "What?" "They hit it this morning. Federal marshals. Maybe 20 of them. They had warrants. Arrest warrants for you, for Nora, for anyone connected to the raids." Daniel gulped air. "They torched the building after. Said they were cleaning out a criminal operation." Nora appeared from across the clearing. "How many casualties?" "Don't know. I rode here as soon as I saw the smoke." Malachi was already moving toward the horses. "We go. Now." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Malachi, you stay here. I'll be back." "No." Her grip tightened. "I'm coming with you." He wanted to argue, wanted to keep her safe and away from whatever they'd find. But he saw the determination in her eyes and knew she wouldn't listen. "Fine. Stay close to me." They rode out within minutes. Malachi, Sarah, Nora, Moses, Thomas, and 3 others. 8 riders pushing their horses as fast as the animals could manage. The safe house was a 2-hour ride north. They made it in 90 minutes. The building was still smoking when they arrived. What had once been a sturdy 2-story structure was now just charred beams and collapsed walls. Black smoke rose into the evening sky. The smell of burned wood mixed with something worse, burned flesh. Survivors huddled in small groups at the edge of the clearing. Maybe 15 people total. Some injured, all terrified. Nora dismounted first. Went straight to an older woman she recognized. "What happened?" The woman's hands shook. "They came at dawn. Federal marshals, they said. Had official papers. Demanded everyone come out. When we didn't move fast enough, they started firing. Then they threw torches. How many dead?" 4 that we know of. Maybe more inside." Malachi walked through the ruins. His boots crunched on ash and broken glass. The heat still radiated from some of the larger timbers. Bodies lay under collapsed sections of roof. Blackened, unrecognizable. Moses appeared beside him. This wasn't just law enforcement. This was a message. Malachi knew he was right. Federal marshals didn't burn buildings full of freed people, didn't execute without trial. Someone wanted them destroyed, wanted to make an example. He walked the perimeter, searching for clues, found spent rifle casings, boot prints in the soft earth. Then, something else. A distinctive mark in the dirt near the back wall. A boot print with a worn left heel. The leather carved in a diagonal slash from years of favoring one leg. Malachi had seen that print 100 times over the past few days. Ezra's boot. He stood very still, staring at the mark. His mind rejected what his eyes were showing him. No, not possible. Ezra had saved his life, given him his father's revolver, fought beside him, but the print was unmistakable. Nora found him standing there, followed his gaze to the boot print. Her face went hard. "One of the survivors said they saw Ezra," she said quietly. 3 days ago, talking to white men in northern coats near the river. She thought he was gathering intelligence. He was, Malachi said. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. Just not for us. More pieces clicked into place. How the marshals knew exactly where to find the safe house. How they had detailed warrants with names and descriptions. How they'd moved with such precision. Ezra had given them everything. Sold them out. To whom? Malachi didn't know yet, but he could guess. The investors. The the men funding the shadow plantation network, men with enough money to buy federal marshals and enough power to operate above the law, men who saw Malachi's campaign as a threat to their profits. Moses approached with 2 other men. We found something in the ashes, letters, correspondence between someone using the initial E and businessmen in New Orleans, talking about containing the hawk problem. Malachi took the charred papers, could barely read them, but enough words survived. Investment portfolios, labor contracts, references to neutralizing the Liberation Network, and at the bottom of one page, a signature he recognized. Ezra's handwriting. The men around him waited for orders, for direction, for Malachi to tell them what to do next, but he had nothing. His entire network, compromised, his allies, scattered or arrested, his safe house, destroyed, and the man he'd trusted most had orchestrated it all. Morale collapsed like the burned building behind them. Men sat down where they stood. Women wept. Even Nora looked defeated. The sun set. The sky turned purple, then black. Night fell completely. Malachi climbed a small hill overlooking the ruined safe house, sat alone on the cold ground. Below, the survivors made small fires, huddled together against the dark. He heard footsteps behind him, recognized Sarah's gait without turning. She sat beside him, didn't speak at first, just placed her hand on his shoulder. He wanted to say something, wanted to explain what had happened, what it meant, what they should do next. But the words wouldn't come. His father's revolver felt heavy in its holster. All that skill, all that precision, all those successful raids, none of it mattered now. He'd been fighting a system that was always 10 steps ahead. A system that could buy anyone, turn anyone, even the people you trusted most. Sarah's hand tightened on his shoulder. She understood. She'd survived the same system long enough to know how it worked. They sat together in silence. Below, the fires burned small and weak against an ocean of darkness. The chapter ended without words. Just 2 siblings, watching ruins smolder, wondering if freedom was even possible in a world this broken. Early the next morning arrived without sleep. Malachi sat exactly where Sarah had left him hours ago, on the hill, watching the ruins. His body ached from the stillness, but he couldn't make himself move. The settlement below had transformed overnight. No more children playing, no more casual conversation. Everyone moved with purpose now, with fear. Guards posted at every entrance, weapons kept close, eyes constantly scanning the horizon. They were on alert, waiting for the next attack, and it was his fault. Sarah appeared beside him as dawn broke. She carried 2 tin cups of coffee, sat down and handed him one without asking if he wanted it. He took it, didn't drink. "You haven't slept," she said. "No." "You need to." "Can't." She sipped her own coffee, waited. She'd learned patience during captivity, how to sit with silence until someone was ready to talk. But Malachi wasn't ready. Might never be ready. Around mid-morning, Nora climbed the hill, brought news that 3 more families had left the settlement during the night, too scared to stay, too worried that federal marshals would come for everyone connected to the hawk. Malachi just nodded. Couldn't blame them. Nora left without pushing for a response. Moses tried next, around noon. Suggested they relocate the entire settlement. Find somewhere deeper in the backcountry, where marshals couldn't reach. Malachi told him to do whatever he thought best. Moses studied him for a long moment, then walked away, shaking his head. By afternoon, Malachi stood and began walking, not toward the settlement, away from it, into the woods that bordered the eastern edge of their land. Sarah called after him. He didn't respond. He just walked. The woods were quiet, empty, exactly what he needed. Malachi moved without direction, just put one foot in front of the other, tried to outrun the thoughts circling his mind like buzzards over carrion. 4 people dead because he'd trusted Ezra. Dozens arrested because he'd believed they could fight a system this powerful. An entire network destroyed because he'd been arrogant enough to think his father's revolver and his own skill could change anything. The boy he'd watched get dragged back at Holt Plantation was probably still there, still suffering, and Malachi had accomplished nothing except getting more people hurt. He walked until the sun began setting, found himself at a small creek, sat on a fallen log and stared at the water. His father's revolver hung heavy at his hip. He pulled it free, looked at it in the fading light. All that inherited skill, all that deadly precision. What had it brought him? Violence, betrayal, ruin. Maybe his original instinct had been right. Maybe he should have never touched a weapon. Maybe freedom couldn't be won through bloodshed, only through patience, through legal means, through appealing to the better nature of men who had none. He heard footsteps behind him, lighter than Moses, faster than Nora. Sarah. Always Sarah. She sat beside him on the log, didn't ask permission, didn't wait for invitation. "You planning to throw that in the creek?" she asked, nodding at the revolver in his hands. "Thinking about it. Won't bring those people back. Won't get anyone else killed either." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, worn from handling, kept hidden throughout her captivity. She unfolded it carefully, showed him. It was a list, written in pencil in her careful handwriting. Names of places, routes, dates, fragments of conversations. "I started writing this the second day they held me," she said. "Every time they moved me, I memorized the route. Every time the guards talked, I listened. Every time I saw paperwork, I read what I could and wrote it down later." Malachi stared at the paper. "Why?" "Because I knew you'd come." She said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I knew you'd find me, and I knew you'd need this information when you did." She pointed to a notation near the bottom of the page. "Red Cedar Parish. 4 days from now. There's a meeting scheduled at the old courthouse, the one that burned during the war. The investors gather there twice a year to settle accounts and plan operations. I heard guards talking about it. They said all the major players would be there." Malachi looked at her. "All of them?" "The men funding the network, the ex-Confederate officers running security, the northern businessmen providing legal cover." She folded the paper and pressed it into his palm. "Everyone who makes this system work." He stared down at the note, at his sister's careful handwriting, evidence she'd been preparing for this moment even while she was captive. "I can't," he said quietly. "Sarah, every time I try to fight this, more people die. The safe house, those 4 people yesterday. How many more before I accept that violence only breeds more violence? You think silence will protect anyone?" Her voice was sharp now, cutting through his self-pity like a blade. "Those investors will keep operating whether you fight them or not. Those plantations will keep running. More people will be taken, more families destroyed. Your silence won't save anyone. It'll just let the system win. I'm one man with a gun." "No." She grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. "You're the man who liberated 30 plantations, who gave hundreds of people their freedom back, who showed everyone that the system isn't invincible. That's why they betrayed you. That's why they're scared. Because you proved they can be beaten. And look where that got us. It got us here, together, alive, with information that can end this." She squeezed his arm harder. "You didn't lose, Malachi. You just learned who your real enemy is. Not the overseers, not the guards, the men at the top. The ones who profit while staying clean." Malachi looked back at the water, at the darkening sky reflected in its surface. She was right. Of course she was right. Running wouldn't protect anyone. Hiding wouldn't free anyone. The system would continue grinding people into dust, whether he fought it or not. The only question was whether he'd stand against it or let it win through his absence. He thought about that boy at Holt Plantation, about the people still trapped, about Sarah, who'd been brave enough to gather intelligence while captive because she believed her brother would come. She'd kept fighting even when she had nothing. How could he do less? The next morning, Malachi walked back to the settlement. Sarah walked beside him. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. When they arrived, Nora was distributing rifles to volunteers. She looked up as Malachi approached. Her expression was careful, uncertain. "We're planning a supply run to another settlement," she said, "moving most of the families there until things settle." "Good," Malachi said. "But I need 8 people to stay, people who can shoot, people who understand what we're up against." Nora's eyes sharpened. "For what?" "Red Cedar Parish, 4 days from now." He explained what Sarah had told him, about the investors' meeting, about the opportunity to hit the system at its source instead of just its branches. Moses stepped forward. "That's suicide. They'll have guards, security. It'll be a trap." "Probably," Malachi agreed. "But it's also our best chance to end this permanently, by killing them, by exposing them." Malachi looked around at the gathered faces. "We force a public confession. Get evidence that connects them to the Shadow Plantation network. Make it impossible for them to operate in the dark anymore." Thomas spoke up. "And if they won't confess? Then we make sure they can't hurt anyone else ever again." The group was silent, processing, weighing the risk against the potential reward. That night, around the fire, they talked through the plan. Sarah provided details about the courthouse location. Nora's remaining spies confirmed the meeting was real. Moses sketched out approach routes. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next morning came with cautious purpose. People began preparing, cleaning weapons, packing supplies, making arrangements for the families who would relocate. Malachi spent the day checking and rechecking his father's revolver, making sure every mechanism worked perfectly. He couldn't afford mistakes. Not this time. That night, Sarah found him sharpening his knife. She sat beside him in comfortable silence. "You sure about this?" she asked eventually. "No," he admitted. "But I'm done running." She nodded. "Good. Because I'm coming with you." "Sarah, I memorized those routes. I know the courthouse layout from the guards' descriptions. You need me there." He wanted to argue, wanted to keep her safe and far away from danger. But he saw that same determination in her eyes that had kept her gathering intelligence while captive. "Stay behind me," he said finally. "Always." On the 4th morning, Malachi woke before dawn. The settlement was already stirring. 8 people had volunteered to ride with him. Moses, Thomas, Nora, Sarah. 4 others, whose names he'd learned over the past weeks of fighting. Good people. Brave. People willing to risk everything for a chance at real freedom. Malachi dressed carefully, strapped his father's revolver to his hip, checked his rifle, made sure his knife was sharp. When he emerged from his tent, the others were already mounted, waiting. Sarah sat her horse with quiet confidence. Nora checked her weapons one final time. Moses nodded at him. Ready. Malachi climbed onto his own horse, looked at each face in turn. "Whatever happens today," he said, "the system ends, one way or another." He holstered his father's revolver with deliberate finality, nodded to his allies. "We finish it today." The group turned their horses toward Red Cedar Parish and rode into the pre-dawn darkness. Late afternoon sun painted the abandoned courthouse in shades of rust and shadow. The building stood like a broken tooth against the Louisiana sky. Half its roof gone, walls blackened by old fire, windows empty as dead eyes. Perfect. Malachi and his group stopped their horses in the tree line half a mile out. From here they could see the courthouse clearly, could see the 4 carriages parked in the overgrown courtyard, could see guards posted at the front entrance. "Count 6 outside," Moses whispered. Probably more inside. Nora studied the building through a small brass telescope. The meeting's already started. I see lamplight in the main chamber. Sarah leaned closer to Malachi, pointed at the eastern side of the building. There. See that collapsed wall? Behind it is a cellar entrance. The guards mentioned it when they thought I wasn't listening. Said the old courthouse had holding cells underneath. Malachi nodded. How do we reach it without being seen? Drainage ditch runs along the back of the property. Overgrown now, but deep enough to move through if we stay low. Thomas checked his rifle. What about the guards? We handle them quietly, Malachi said. Nora, your people cut off the roads leading out. Make sure nobody rides away when this starts. Moses, Thomas, you two control the outer grounds. Anyone tries to leave, you stop them. And inside? Moses asked. Sarah and I go in through the cellar. We listen first, confirm who's there. Then we seal the exits and force them into one place. Nora lowered her telescope. You really think they'll confess? They'll confess? Or they'll burn with their own evidence? Malachi's voice was flat, final. Either way, the network ends tonight. They moved at twilight. Nora's spies scattered first, taking positions along the 3 roads leading to the courthouse. They carried lengths of chain and iron spikes, enough to block carriage wheels, enough to trap anyone trying to flee. Moses and Thomas approached from opposite sides, using the ruined walls for cover. They eliminated the exterior guards one by one, quietly, efficiently. No shots fired. Malachi and Sarah moved through the drainage ditch exactly as she'd described, knee-deep in stagnant water and rotting leaves. The smell was thick enough to taste. They reached the collapsed eastern wall just as full darkness settled. The cellar entrance was there. A heavy wooden door set into the ground at an angle, half hidden by dead vines. Malachi tested it carefully. The hinges groaned, but held. He eased it open just enough for them to slip through. Inside, stone steps descended into absolute darkness. Malachi lit a small candle stub, just enough light to see 3 steps ahead. Sarah followed close behind. The cellar was larger than expected. Old holding cells lined both walls, their iron bars orange with rust. At the far end, wooden stairs led upward toward the main floor, and through the floorboards above, voices carried clearly. Malachi extinguished the candle, gestured for Sarah to stay low. They crept to the base of the stairs and listened. "Shipment arrives Tuesday," a voice was saying. Northern accent, clipped and businesslike. 43 laborers total. Premium stock. We'll distribute them across the Mississippi properties first. Another voice, deeper, southern. What about the federal heat? I heard they're asking questions in Natchez. Let them ask, the northern voice again. Our paperwork is clean. Labor contracts, debt agreements, apprenticeships, all legal on paper. They can't prove coercion. A third voice laughed. Malachi's blood went cold. Ezra Pike. Gentlemen, you worry too much, Ezra said smoothly. The resistance is scattered. Their leaders in hiding. By month's end, we'll be operating at full capacity again. What about the raids? Someone asked. 30 plantations hit in less than 2 months? A temporary setback. The man calling himself the Hawk is finished. His networks destroyed. His allies arrested or scattered. He's just one man now. Broken, desperate, and irrelevant. Silence. Then the northern voice spoke again. Even so, we should discuss additional security measures. Perhaps relocate some of the higher-value assets. Agreed. I propose we... Malachi stopped listening. He'd heard enough. He signaled to Sarah. She nodded and moved back down the cellar, slipping out the way they'd entered. Her job was to bring Moses and Thomas to the front entrance. Malachi stayed below, counting heartbeats, waiting for the signal. 10 minutes later, he heard it. A sharp whistle from outside. Moses. Malachi moved fast. He climbed the stairs 3 at a time, emerged into a side hallway. The main chamber was directly ahead, yellow lamplight spilling through the open doorway. He could see them now. 8 men seated around a massive oak table, ledgers open before them, cash stacked in neat piles, maps marked with symbols matching Sarah's notes. At the head of the table sat Ezra Pike, looking comfortable, looking safe, looking exactly like what he was, a man who'd sold out his own people for a seat at the table of power. Malachi stepped into the doorway. "Meeting's over," he said. Every head turned. Ezra's eyes went wide. "Malachi, shut your mouth." Outside, chains rattled as Moses and Thomas sealed the main entrance. Through the broken windows, Malachi saw Nora's people surrounding the building, torches lit, rifles ready. One of the investors, a heavy man in an expensive suit, started to stand. "Now see here." Malachi drew his father's revolver. Didn't aim it at anyone, just held it loose and ready. The man sat back down. "All of you stay seated," Malachi said quietly. "Hands on the table where I can see them." The northern businessman, the one with the clipped accent, tried diplomacy. "Young man, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I know exactly what I'm doing." Malachi stepped fully into the room. "I'm ending your operation. Tonight. Permanently. You can't..." "Can't what? Can't prove you're running an illegal trafficking network? Can't show that you've been enslaving freed people under false contracts?" Malachi gestured at the table. "Your own ledgers will do that for me." Ezra leaned forward, tried that old mentor tone. "Malachi, listen, you're making a mistake. These men have protection, political connections. You kill them, and you'll hang." "I'm not going to kill anyone," Malachi said. "You're all going to confess, publicly, with witnesses." The heavy man laughed. "You're insane. Why would we—" Smoke began seeping under the door. Thomas had lit the smoke pots. Within seconds, the acrid gray clouds filled the hallway outside. The men at the table started coughing, started panicking. "The exits are sealed," Malachi said calmly. "The building's surrounded. You try to run, my people stop you. You try to fight, you lose. Your only choice is confession." "We'll burn alive," someone shouted. "Then confess faster." The northern businessman stood. "This is extortion. This is justice." Malachi's voice cut like steel. "You built a system that treated people like property, destroyed families, stole freedom. Now you answer for it." Ezra tried one more time. "Malachi, please. We can work something out. Money. Safe passage for your sister. Whatever you want. I want the truth. All of it. Names, locations, financial backers, everything." The smoke was getting thicker now. The men were genuinely frightened. Finally, the northern businessman cracked. "Fine, fine. I'll tell you everything. Just get us out of here." "Start talking," Malachi said. "And make it loud. We have witnesses outside waiting to hear every word." For the next hour, Malachi extracted confession after confession. The northern businessman named every investor. The southern gentleman revealed the property locations. Others provided details about bribed officials, forged documents, and planned expansion. Ezra sat silently through it all, face expressionless. When the others were spent, Malachi finally looked at him. "Your turn." "I have nothing to say." "Then say nothing." Malachi's voice was cold. "Just know that I'm not here to end men. I'm here to end systems. You were part of that system. Now you burn with it." Outside, new voices called out. Federal officers, Union soldiers, and, if Malachi wasn't mistaken, the voice of Marcus Webb, publisher of the Freedmen's Advocate, the black newspaper out of New Orleans. Nora had done her job perfectly. The witnesses had arrived just in time to hear everything. 30 minutes later, Malachi stood outside in the cooling night air. Inside the courthouse, lanterns illuminated captured investors being placed in shackles by federal officers. Marcus Webb scribbled furiously in his notebook, recording every detail. Nora supervised as soldiers confiscated ledgers, maps, and cash. The system was falling. Not because Malachi had killed anyone, not because he'd burned anything down, because he'd forced the truth into daylight, where it couldn't hide anymore. Sarah stepped beside him, put a hand on his arm. "It's over," she said softly. Malachi breathed deeply. The night air was cool and clean after the smoke inside. For the first time in weeks, his chest didn't feel tight. "Yeah," he said. "It's over." The following morning broke cold and clear. Malachi stood outside the settlement's main gathering place, watching Union soldiers prepare their horses. Captain Morrison, a white officer with gray streaks in his beard, checked supply packs methodically. His men moved with practiced efficiency. Sarah emerged from the building behind Malachi, carrying 2 canteens of fresh water. She handed one to him without speaking. Nora appeared moments later, flanked by 3 of her network's most trusted scouts. Maps were spread across a makeshift table constructed from old barrels and planks. "The closest one is Riverside," Nora said, pointing to a mark on the map. 8 miles northeast. According to the ledger, they're holding 42 people under false debt contracts. Captain Morrison joined them at the table. "We'll approach from 3 directions. Secure the perimeter first. No violence unless absolutely necessary." "They'll resist," Malachi said quietly. "They always do. Then we'll be ready." Morrison's voice carried the weight of experience. "But we do this by law. Arrests, not executions." Malachi nodded. He understood. The time for shadow warfare was over. Now came the slower, harder work of legal justice. They rode out within the hour. Riverside Plantations sat along a bend in the muddy water that gave it its name. The main house was smaller than most, just 2 stories, whitewashed boards peeling from neglect. Behind it stretched rows of worker cabins, a barn, and holding pens that should have been torn down years ago. They arrived mid-morning. The overseer, a thin man named Garrett, met them at the property line with a shotgun across his lap. "This is private property," Garrett called out. "You got no business here." Captain Morrison held up official papers. "Federal warrant. We're here to inspect labor contracts and interview workers. Those people signed legal agreements. Then you have nothing to hide." Morrison gestured to his men. "We're coming through." Garrett raised the shotgun. "Like hell you are." Malachi's hand moved to his revolver. But Morrison raised a hand, stopping him. "Mr. Garrett," Morrison said calmly, "you can cooperate peacefully, or you can face additional charges for obstruction of federal authority. Your choice." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett lowered the shotgun. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine. Do what you want." The workers were gathered in the barn. 42 people, just as the ledger had indicated. Most were men between 20 and 50. A few women. 3 children, no older than 10. When the soldiers entered, several workers flinched. Years of conditioning made them expect violence from armed white men. But Nora stepped forward, spoke in a clear, steady voice. "My name is Nora Bennett. These soldiers are here to help. You're not in trouble. Nobody's going to hurt you." Silence. Then an older woman near the back spoke up. "They said we owed money. Said we couldn't leave until the debt was paid." "Those debts aren't legal," Nora said. "You don't owe anyone anything. You're free to go right now if you want." "Where would we go?" "We have a settlement. Safe. Run by freed people. You're welcome there, or we can help you find family." Slowly, hesitantly, people began asking questions. Nora and her scouts answered each one patiently. By noon, all 42 workers were loading onto wagons. Garrett and 2 other overseers sat in shackles, guarded by federal soldiers. The plantation was empty by sunset. The next morning, they hit Magnolia Ridge. 37 people freed. 2 overseers arrested. 1 fled into the woods and wasn't pursued. The morning after that, Cypress Hollow. 51 people freed. The owner, an elderly man who insisted he'd done nothing wrong, collapsed from heart failure when the soldiers arrived. He died before reaching town. Malachi felt nothing watching it happen. On the fourth day, they reached Belmont Estate. 63 people freed. The overseer there tried to burn the worker cabins rather than surrender. Moses stopped him with a rifle shot that shattered the man's kneecap. The overseer screamed for mercy. Malachi walked past him without looking down. By the end of the first week, 11 plantations had fallen. The raids developed a rhythm. Soldiers secured the perimeter. Nora's scouts interviewed workers. Overseers were arrested or fled. Freed captives were transported to the settlement or reunited with families through Nora's network. Malachi participated in the first several operations. His presence alone often ended resistance before it began. Word had spread. The hawk was coming, and he didn't miss. But as the days passed, Malachi gradually stepped back. At the 12th plantation, he stayed with the wagons while younger men handled the raid. At the 15th, he remained at the settlement entirely, helping Sarah organize housing for new arrivals. The work didn't need him anymore. Community leaders stepped forward. Federal officers took charge. The system was collapsing under its own exposed weight. Malachi's role was ending. On the 10th day, a letter arrived. Captain Morrison handed it to Malachi personally, from the parish jail. Prisoner named Ezra Pike. Malachi stared at the sealed envelope. His name was written across the front in Ezra's familiar handwriting. He carried it to a quiet spot behind the settlement's rebuilt communal hall, broke the seal, read, "Malachi, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to understand why I did what I did. After the war, I thought freedom meant safety. I thought if I worked with powerful men, white men with money and connections, I could protect myself, protect my future. I was wrong. I see that now. I traded other people's freedom for my own imagined security. I became exactly what we fought against. You were right to stop me, right to expose us all. I just hope you don't lose yourself the way I did. Whatever happens to me, I earned it. But you finish this the right way. Don't let violence corrupt what you're building." Ezra Malachi read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his satchel. He didn't write back, didn't visit the jail, didn't speak Ezra's name again. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, only acknowledged and left behind. By the 14th day, 28 plantations had been shut down. Investors' testimonies spread across state lines. Newspapers in 3 states published Marcus Webb's reports. Federal marshals issued warrants for dozens of officials who'd accepted bribes. The entire shadow network was unraveling. The final 2 plantations collapsed without resistance. The owners fled before soldiers arrived, abandoning everything. On the evening of the 14th day, Malachi returned to the settlement one last time. Children spotted him first. They came running across the open ground, laughing and shouting his name. He knelt down and let them swarm him, their small hands grabbing his coat and arms. "Mr. Malachi? Mr. Malachi? Did you bring more people?" "Not today," he said, smiling despite his exhaustion. Sarah appeared at the communal hall entrance. She'd been inside, teaching reading lessons to a group of adults. Now she stepped out into the fading sunlight, wiping chalk dust from her hands. She walked toward him slowly. Her expression was soft, knowing. When she reached him, she took his hand. Her fingers were warm. Together they walked across the settlement grounds, past the newly constructed cabins, past the shared garden plots, past the workshop where freedmen built furniture and tools. They reached the communal hall, a simple structure with a peaked roof and wide doors that stood open to welcome everyone. Inside, long tables were set for evening meal. Lanterns hung from beams. Voices echoed off wooden walls as people shared stories, made plans, rebuilt lives. Sarah squeezed Malachi's hand gently. The next morning arrived gently. Sunrise spilled across the settlement in warm golden waves, touching cabin roofs and garden plots with soft light. The air smelled of pine smoke and fresh bread. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crowed. Malachi woke to the sound of voices outside his cabin. Happy voices, children laughing, adults calling to each other across the open ground. He sat up slowly, feeling the familiar ache in his shoulders, the kind that came from honest work, not violence. Through the window, he could see families gathering near the communal hall. Tables were being carried outside. People were setting up for something. Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed. She held 2 tin cups of coffee. "They're planning a celebration," she said, handing him one, "for the liberation of the last plantation." Malachi took the cup. The coffee was hot and bitter, made from roasted chicory root. It tasted like freedom. Imperfect, but real. "We should help," he said. Together, they stepped outside. The settlement had changed dramatically in 2 weeks. What had started as a collection of makeshift shelters now resembled a real town. Cabins stood in neat rows, each with a small porch and window boxes waiting for spring flowers. A well had been dug in the center square. A blacksmith's forge sent up steady smoke near the workshop. More than 200 people lived here now, freed captives from 30 plantations, families reunited after years apart, children who would never know chains. Everyone contributed something. The men built structures and cleared land. The women organized kitchens and medical care. The children hauled water and gathered firewood. Nobody was idle. Nobody was forced. It was the first truly free community Malachi had ever seen. Tables filled the space between the communal hall and the well. Women carried out platters of cornbread, greens, and salt pork. Men stacked firewood for evening bonfires. Children decorated posts with strips of colored cloth salvaged from old dresses and shirts. Nora stood near the center of activity, directing everything with calm efficiency. When she spotted Malachi, she waved him over. "There you are," she said. "I was hoping to talk with you." "About what?" "The future." Nora gestured to a quieter spot away from the preparation. They walked together to the shade of a large oak tree. "I've been thinking," Nora said. "We need a newspaper. A real one, run by freed people, telling our own stories. Marcus Webb helped us, but we can't rely on white publishers forever." Malachi nodded. "Makes sense. I want to start it here, in this settlement. Make this place more than just a refuge. Make it a center for organizing, education, information." She paused. "I'll need help. People who understand what we're building." "You'll have it," Malachi said simply. Nora smiled. "I knew you'd say that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the settlement come alive with celebration preparations. "You did something important," Nora said quietly. "You know that, right? Not just freeing people. You showed them freedom was possible, that we could fight systems and win." Malachi looked down at his hands. They were scarred from labor, calloused from building. Not long ago, they'd been covered in gunpowder residue. "I'm not sure I won anything," he said. "You're still here, still free, still choosing what comes next." Nora touched his arm gently. "That's winning." By midday, the celebration was in full swing. Long tables groaned under shared food. Musicians played fiddles and drums made from barrels. Children ran between adults' legs, shrieking with joy. Old songs were sung. Spirituals that had once whispered coded escape routes now shouted openly in daylight. Sarah stood near the communal hall entrance, surrounded by a group of children. She'd started teaching reading lessons 3 days ago. Already, a dozen students showed up each morning, eager to learn letters and numbers. Malachi watched her from across the square. She looked different now, stronger. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes after Fort Jessup was fading, replaced by something steadier. Purpose, maybe. Hope. She caught him watching and smiled, waved him over. He made his way through the crowd, The children looked up as he approached, eyes wide with curiosity. "Mr. Malachi," one little girl said, "Miss Sarah says you can read real good. Will you read to us?" Malachi hesitated. "I'm not much of a teacher. Just one story," Sarah said, holding out a worn Bible. "Please?" He took the book carefully. Found a passage he remembered from childhood, the story of Moses leading people out of bondage. The children gathered close as he read. His voice was rough at first, unpracticed, but as the words flowed, something loosened in his chest. These children would grow up reading, writing, choosing their own paths. That mattered more than any raid ever could. Late afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Captain Morrison arrived on horseback, accompanied by a federal marshal Malachi didn't recognize. They dismounted near the settlement entrance and asked for Malachi by name. Malachi met them at the well. Sarah stood nearby, protective. "Mr. Holt," Morrison said formally, "this is Marshal Thomas Grant from the regional office in Baton Rouge." Grant was a broad-shouldered white man with steel-gray hair. He studied Malachi with sharp eyes. "I've read the reports," Grant said, "about your role in dismantling the trafficking network. Impressive work." "It wasn't just me," Malachi said. "Modest. I like that." Grant pulled an envelope from his coat. "The Bureau is expanding operations in Louisiana and Mississippi. We need good men who understand these communities. Men with your skills." He held out the envelope. "It's an official offer. Federal marshal position. Good pay, authority to operate across state lines. You would be valuable." Malachi stared at the envelope without taking it. "I appreciate the offer," he said slowly, "but I'm done carrying guns for anyone, government included." Grant frowned. "You'd be helping people, protecting freedmen from—" "I know what I'd be doing." Malachi's voice was firm but not angry. "And I'm grateful for everything the Bureau has done. But my fight was never about becoming part of the system. It was about dismantling it. So what will you do instead?" Malachi gestured to the settlement around them. "Build, teach, help people plant roots in free soil. That's what matters now." Grant studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and tucked the envelope away. "Can't fault a man for knowing what he wants," Grant said. "But if you change your mind, the offer stands." They shook hands. Morrison and Grant mounted their horses and rode away, leaving dust hanging in the afternoon air. Sarah touched Malachi's shoulder. "You sure about that?" "Yes," he said. "I'm sure." Late afternoon melted into evening. Malachi walked to the edge of the settlement, needing space to think. He found himself on a small hill overlooking the community from the north side. From here, he could see everything. The cabins, the gardens, the communal hall with its wide-open doors. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.